Have you ever wondered about terrorism in the same way?
Gosh, what an interesting question. I have worked with some terrorist offenders.
Really?
Hmm. Um, I think terrorism feels in the. I have to be really careful. It's different from being a world leader. I think that when I say lots of people, I haven't worked with a lot of terrorists, but of the ones that I have worked with, there has been such a strong sense of justification. I guess then that is the same, I guess, for a world leader. But I also know that some very vulnerable people have been manipulated into behaving in a particular way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had one of the senior police officials from Mumbai on the show a few years ago.
Mm,
So Mumbai had gone through a really bad terror attack in 2008,
mm,
the 26/11 attack on the Taj Hotel.
mm,
Um, and the one terrorist that survived from, I think it was a
mm,
group of 8 to 10 terrorists in
mm,
total, I think.
mm,
And they were all taken out in one way or the other by the
mm,
commandos, etc.
mm,
But the one guy who survived was kept alive for, I think, a couple of years after that. Eventually, he was
mm,
given a death sentence.
mm,
And his name was Kasab. His topic has been brought up on the show a lot. I
mm,
asked Mr. Shivanandan, I asked Vishwas Nagre Patil, all these police officers who were kind of a part of saving Mumbai during 26/11.
mm,
The ones who met Kasab have all said that he was an 18, 19-year-old boy from some village in Pakistan where he was brainwashed, told that he's going to do something right, he's going to do
mm,
God's work,
mm.
and went and took out the lives of countless human beings
Yeah.
through bombs and through
Yeah.
guns. And they had mercilessly killed a lot of civilians.
Mm,
Like I remember as a kid, I was 14 years old that time,
mm,
13, 14. Uh, and we were shocked even as kids that this very normal city where you grow up in, the railway station that you know about, has been brutally attacked.
yeah. Yeah.
There were images of, dead bodies just lying down. Uh, very, very brutal terrorist attack. But this kid thought that he was doing something right.
Mm,
I think where I'm going at with this whole conversation, the
mm,
question I'm going towards is about this element of brainwashing when it comes to terrorism.
mm,
You said something about vulnerability
mm,
in a potential terrorist.
mm.
What the police officers said was that vulnerability comes from a lack of education. They haven't seen the world, they don't have perspective.
Okay.
So it's fodder for
Yeah.
um, being able to be
Yeah.
brainwashed. So I had to just give this context
Yeah.
here.
I mean, vulnerability is, I don't think it's just about education or lack of it. I think it's about lack of community support. It's about mental ill health. And we all move in and out of vulnerability all the time. There'll be times in your life where you felt more vulnerable, in my life when I felt more vulnerable. And one of the things we do in our line of work is safeguarding and understanding how we move in and out of vulnerability. So I'm thinking in prisons, let's say a young Muslim lad who maybe has had a really shitty time in the community. He's been, experienced a lot of racism and prejudice. He commits an offence. He gets into prison. He hates everything about his community. He's lost his connection to his family because he's committed an offence. And then there's some very charismatic leader of some cell who says, "Come on, we'll look after you. We'll take care of you. We'll make you feel special." It's very seductive. Why wouldn't you go into that if you're already feeling really vulnerable? Now, it may be, maybe you're very bright and maybe you are educated, but you're still vulnerable. So you get sucked into something. And then, of course, we get into this whole issue of life and death, about what are people willing to give up? They're willing to give up their lives for a cause that they believe so strongly. And if we're starting talking about suicide bombing, for example. And that's a whole other mindset. How do you get into the mind of somebody who's willing to end their lives for a greater good that they presumably believe is going to happen, even though, in my view, they'll never know? So this could get really deep.
No, sure. What do you think senior terrorist leaders look out for in potential terrorists who are not terrorists yet?
Youngsters who are disenfranchised, who are disconnected, who don't have an anchor in their community. And I think that's absolutely the same with the way people target victims of sexual abuse. Um,
Well, that was a
sorry.
very complex thought.
Yeah. So The one thing we know is that youngsters who have a very present parent, somebody who makes their presence obvious, are far less likely to be targeted as a victim of sexual abuse and almost far less likely to be targeted as a victim for potential terrorist activity as well. You know, if trying to think of how I could give you an example. You know, let's say I'll just talk about children generally. So this could be targeting a child for anything, for trafficking, for terrorism, for abuse. If I'm an offender looking out, if I'm a terrorist cell leader or a child trafficker or an offender, and I'm hanging around the playground, I'm going to look for the child whose parent never comes to pick them up, or who's always late, or who doesn't really talk to their child, who's always on their phone. Those are the kids I'm going to target, the ones who don't have a present adult, the ones who are left hanging around on their own, who are unlikely to talk to their parents about things. I am not going to target the child for whatever purposes, whose mum or dad is always there, who's engaging with the child in conversation as they leave school, who isn't constantly on their phone or distracted. Okay, so and I think that's the same for anyone who's trying to suck somebody into nefarious activity. They're going to choose the most vulnerable person. And that vulnerability might come from lack of education, but it might come from an absent adult or a strong adult figure. It doesn't have to be a parent. I mean, we know from research that the most resilient people are the ones who've had a strong adult figure in their lives. Could have been a teacher, could have been a carer of some sort, could have been a grandparent, an aunt or uncle. It doesn't have to be a mum or dad, could have been an older sibling, but they've got someone, some stable source in their lives who keeps them safe.
Wow.
Um, but the kids who have no one, they're the kids who are most vulnerable. And that's the same in prison, that's the same in terrorism, it's the same in abuse, in my view.
So, I mean, I'd also categorize terrorists as criminals. So, criminals, before committing a crime, scout the location that they want to commit the crime in and scout all the situations around the location.
Yeah.
So, you're saying that the senior terrorist probably targeted this potential junior terrorist by first observing his family.
Or just making if they're in prison, they might make observations about who gets visits regularly, who's getting into trouble, who's looking most vulnerable, who's less involved and maybe isolated. It's very easy to find vulnerability if you look for it.
So, you have worked with someone who's been a terrorist.
Yeah.
Do they look at killing another human being as plus points for their own cause?
I remember a time when a terrorist attack happened and the terrorists on the unit were celebrating the death of the people who died because it was part of their cause. Very hard for the staff to watch this celebration of people dying.
In the
Um,
prison?
yeah, the terrorist attack didn't happen in prison. It was televised, and the guys who were on the unit who'd been convicted of terrorist offences were celebrating this terrorist attack, which obviously resulted in a lot of life. And I remember the staff, as I was working with the staff at that point, just saying how repulsed and disgusted they felt, and that it made it really hard for them to keep their professional boundaries. And I get that totally, but they have to because they're professionals. And that was part of that debriefing with them about why were those people celebrating the death of people in a terrorist attack. So yeah, the human mind is a very, very, very complex thing.
What's the mental soup that they're in?
Who knows? Who
It's
knows?
too complex.
Well, I think if you had time and you were working alongside those people, um, you would begin to understand it just in the same way that we've understood other offences. But you have to walk in their shoes to really get it. From out here, it's too hard.
Okay, kind of unrelated, but yet possibly related question.
Mm.
Is there an element of hypnosis of some kind at play? And is hypnosis even a real thing?
I think you can only be hypnotised if you allow yourself to be. I do think you have a choice about whether or not some people are hypnotizable because they just don't want to relinquish the control of their mind in that way. So I think hypnosis is a thing. Paul McKenna would argue it is, isn't he? He's a very famous hypnotist. I've never trained in hypnosis and I've never tried it and I've never been hypnotized.
Have you dealt with any element of hypnosis?
No,
No?
no.
Okay. There is a part of me that kind of feels like that. I mean, for lack of better words, uh, some level of hypnosis is at play with these. Like, how do you get a human being to go kill a bunch of people and not feel anything
I
about it?
know. I think maybe indoctrination. And I think also we don't necessarily assume that they don't feel anything. I mean, it seems like such a weird thing to do.
Did
Weird being an understatement.
the terrorist that you worked with, did he feel anything at all?
We didn't really get into the therapeutic side of it. So the terrorists that they wouldn't engage in therapeutic work. So I was working with them more in terms of the staff and the imams who are responsible for their care. So I didn't get that far. But I think it would be wrong to assume they don't feel anything. And I think also when you think about what terrorism means, it means to create terror. And a serial killer can create terror. We just don't choose to call him a terrorist or her.
Hmm.
So terrorism is just a way of labeling a bunch of people who are offending, but they're offending in a
Hmm.
particular context and in a particular way. I often feel we should probably change the word. I think it gives it a kind of I don't know. I wanted the word that came into my mind is a glory. It gives it a
Yeah.
glory. I'm a terrorist. I mean, we can be terrorized by a dog. A
Hmm.
dog running rampant is terrifying, and that's what terrorism is. It's designed to cause terror.
But effectively, they're just a
So
team of serial killers.
basically, yeah, I guess ultimately, or mass rather than serial killers, mass they kill a lot of people at once rather than a number of people sequentially. Yeah. But then we could say the same. It depends what side of the fence you're on, doesn't it? You could say the same about politicians who order the execution of thousands of people in the name of whatever, whether that be Bosnia or Yugoslavia or, I'm not pointing at any particular war, but somebody makes the decision that all those people are going to die. I just find that mind blowing. And why is that different from terrorism? Somebody makes a decision, a lot of people are going to die. It's just one of them is legitimate, allegedly, and the other one isn't. There's no difference. It all ends in the massacre of lots of people.